football, head football coach of Champaign Central Maroons in Champaign, Illinois. Today I'm here with Coach Quarles, and we are in Maryville, Tennessee at Maryville High School. Coach, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Coach Quarles, in case you guys don't know, which you probably don't, unless you're a Tennessee guy, you know that Coach Quarles here at Maryville High School, they have won 9 state championships in his tenure as a head coach since the year 2000. And they have, just last year, most recently, came off a runner-up. And Coach Quarles, maybe you kind of talked about last year, the runner-up, your defense wasn't quite as strong. Are you guys known for playing great defense here?
We're probably known a little bit more for our offense and our defense being really, really solid and steady and not giving up big plays. And last year was just one of those years. We gave up some big plays. We were able to go 14-1, lost in the state championship game, but defensively, you know, whether it's lack of talent, lack of understanding, maybe some guys in the wrong spot, or for whatever reason, we just weren't as good defensively last year as we had been used to being. And you know, Coach Gaylor, our defense coordinator, he's a 4-3 guy, cover 2. We're not real complicated, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Just
sure.
The importance of keeping things simple and where kids can play fast, but you know, for whatever reason, we just weren't as good last year defensively, and that's something we got to work on in the offseason.
Certainly nothing to be ashamed of. As I talked to you, you know, 9 state titles since 2000, 3 runners-up, what you talked about. So you're talking about a slightly off defensive year where you were a runner-up. So you obviously run an incredible program. Last week on the Quickscreen show, we had Coach Brewer over at Sevier County High School, and he talked very, very highly of you and your program, saying really they just play great football. That's all there is to it. They play great football. So, Coach, we're going to talk about that today. Today, our topic of the show is 3 things that'll help you win. You know, so when I look at programs, it's the same in Illinois, all states. There's a lot of good programs, and there's even going to be, you can have a great team. You might have a team come through that comes through and wins the state title.
Sure.
You know, and then there's those guys that they do it again and again and again. And your team is one of those teams right now. You're winning again and again and again. And so I think it's only smart of all of us to say, what can you give us? What insight can you give us into what you've been able to do? And a lot of coaches, and great for them, humility is key, and they pass it off, and they pass it off, they pass it off. But all of us coaches, and it's only coaches that watch this, it's only coaches that have access, we know that we could have a large hand in that too.
Sure.
So we want to know. So if you could, 3 things that help you win. If we start us off, what's number 1, Coach, that you would say is going to help your program win?
Well, let me preface that just a little bit by
Sure.
saying, you know, clearly you got to have good players. And when I first got the job here in '99, you know, we had a group of 8th graders that year that you could tell they were a great class, and thought that they had, maybe if they hung together, if we got some players around them, by the time they were seniors, we'd have a chance to win the state championship. And you know, and I realized a long time ago, I'm a whole lot better coach when I got good players than when we don't. But we just felt like we needed to have a plan, and that's the first thing I think as a coach, that you need to have a plan. And I coached for Jeff Heron in Georgia, my first job, and Jeff's a very successful coach down there. He's in Camden County, Georgia now, who's won a few state championships, and they've been nationally ranked. And I learned from him the importance of having a plan, and whether it's an off-season plan, you know, your defensive plan, offensive plan, whatever, you know, I think it's just so important that your kids understand what's expected of them, and part of that, it goes along with having a plan. And within that plan, I think you have to keep it simple. And I think one of the keys for us is, you know, certainly that consistency. We've had most of our same coaches together since 1999, and around here, that's almost unheard of, you know, to have a group of guys that have stayed together that long. But keeping it simple, allowing your kids to play as fast as possible. And we're a school that, you know, our minority population is about 4%.
Okay.
5%. So, we don't have a ton of speed,
Mm-hmm.
but we have guys that can play fast and who are really good high school players. And we've had our share of Division I players,
Mm-hmm.
but we've not had, like this year, we've got nobody signing anywhere. We've got some good juniors and a couple good sophomores, but right now we're just at a place in our school that, we're average. But I've always said, or always felt like, if you can get a group of average guys to play well together and to play fast and not have to think a whole lot, that you had a chance to be successful and to match speed of other schools. And we got beat in the state championship game this year by Whitehaven out of Memphis, who I think they had like 7 or 8 D1s, and Mark Dodson, the All-American running back, who's at Ole Miss, and that kind of stuff. So I just think that having that plan, being able to keep it simple and understandable, where your kids understand, where they're supposed to be, whether that's off season, whether that's practice, game, where they're not having to think. And like I said, we're at a different place than a lot of coaches because we've been here so long.
Mm-hmm.
And our kids, I've said this for a while, if the coaches weren't at practice one day, I think our kids could get through it. They understand, on that first period where they're going to be,
Mm-hmm.
second period, and all that stuff. And maybe it gets a little boring sometimes, but at the same time, they understand what's expected of them. They know where to go. And I just think that's given us a huge advantage over a lot of schools because our guys know what to do. And when I say keeping it simple, offensively, we've got about 5 or 6 run plays. Now, they look like there's a whole lot more than that.
Sure.
We'll dress them up different, but for our linemen, they got to learn about 5 run plays, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we have different looking plays. It's just different formation, but for the linemen, they're doing the same thing, and so they can play a little faster. They're not having to go to the line of scrimmage and wonder, am I pulling here? Am I
Right.
locking down? Am I zoning? Whatever. And I just think that is so important and so valuable, especially for your offensive guys up front. And then defensively, as many different offenses as are out there now, the spread is really popular.
Right.
People are up tempo. I think being simple there and not making a ton of adjustments, that's just as important on that side of the ball as well. So that's the first one for me is, I think having a plan and trying to keep it as simple as possible.
Now, what would you say is, think of one example that you think would be a common mistake where coaches commonly maybe lose sight of that plan? Does anything come to mind?
Well, I know I catch myself doing it sometimes. You just put too many things in, offensively each week. Maybe you're watching film and you look up, this may work and this may work.
Mm-hmm.
And you look up and you've got a whole board full of things, and there's no way you're going to be able to practice it during that week. And
Right.
I'm a huge believer, if we can't get this many reps of it during the week, then we don't need to try it on Friday night.
Right.
And I've done it. Our biggest mistakes over the years of, overloading the game plan.
Sure.
And so that's, I think, a common mistake that coaches try to make is, just overcoaching.
Okay.
And and a lot of times, fans or critics or whatever, they may get after you a little bit. You don't have this in or that in, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't do you any good to have it in if you can't run it.
Right.
And like I said, we're at a different place because we've been running the same system for a while. So
Mm-hmm.
when our 8th graders, 9th graders come in, they're running the same stuff. By the time they get to be seniors,
Yeah.
they got a pretty good understanding of what's expected of them.
Okay. So, number one was have a plan and a good plan. So with Coach Quarles here, we're going to talk about number 2 thing. How can we separate ourselves and start winning?
And I think I don't know if it's any kind of order or anything, but it's an important thing for us is making sure your players take ownership of the program.
Sure.
And and I tell them this a lot, you know, especially your seniors. You know, guys, this is your team. This is the Maryville High School football team, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just had that speech with our rising seniors here.
Sure.
You know, this is going to be your team. This is going to be how people are going to remember you when you leave here. And you know, we need to be as good as we can possibly be, whether that's 15-0 or 5-5, whatever the best that we can be.
Mm-hmm.
We need to reach that goal somehow. And we talk about, you know, senior leadership and ownership, and you know, and how do we define those things? And to me, it starts, you know, in the hallway or in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
During our weight room time, you know, our kids dress over in the stadium sometimes, and a lot of times there's not a coach there. So the locker room, it can get to looking, you know,
sure.
like nobody's taking care of it. You know, and that's just one example, you know, of how the seniors have to step up and take ownership. You know, sometimes mom and dad aren't going to be there to clean up your room.
Sure.
You know, you've got to clean it up. And that's their room, that's their team. They have to take responsibility of it. You know, the way the rules work in the state of Tennessee during the off season, like coaches can't go out and throw with the players. You know,
sure.
like I can't go out and throw with our quarterbacks and receivers. You know, our kids have to take some ownership there and organize that themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And our kids are great. You know, they understand that, hey, if we don't get it done now, if we're not throwing, if we're not working on routes, if we're not doing that kind of stuff, then, you know, we're not going to be as good as we want to be, you know, during spring practice,
sure.
during the season. So our kids, you know, they do that themselves, and they know what to do. And it goes back to that simple plan, you know, too, of everybody kind of understanding, you know, what's going on. So I know when they throw, they do the exact same stuff that if we were there.
Right.
You know, whether it's going through a route tree or going, you know, maybe work on some combination or some concept, whether it's smash or curl flat or, you know, some 4 verticals, whatever. I know that the quarterbacks are going to get that done. And so that's, you know, just a couple of ways of how I think your players, you know, need to take some ownership of the program, and you know, other ways are, you know, we talk about in the, you know, how important it is to represent, you know, Maryville High School football. And we're in a small town in Tennessee where everywhere these kids go, they're recognized as football players. And,
sure.
And you would think, well, that's a great thing. That can be a negative
right.
thing as well. And you know, so our, you know, and we've clearly had our hiccups along the way.
Sure.
And you know, those are dealt with, and then we try to learn from those and move on. But that ownership of, you know, if I'm a player here and I see some other guys doing some things that maybe we shouldn't be doing, you know, we go and we deal with that. And that's not always been easy. You know, when I first got here, you know, we had a few character issues, and the head coach before me, I thought, did a really good job of making sure that the players police the players. And we're not talking about, you know, bullying or anything like that, but just letting them know that, hey, that's not how we want to
sure.
do things. And I think once you get players who buy in to, you know, it's their team, it's their program, you got them. And
right.
they're gonna go a little bit further for each other and for their coaches and for their community than they would if they're just going out and playing for, you know, AAU team that
sure.
they picked up on the weekend.
Right.
Because it matters to them. And you know, so I think that ownership is just another way to say, you know, hey, it matters
right
to me. And I have so many parents that talk to me about how, you know, their kid never got up in the morning. Well, we do our workouts in the summer early in the morning. Like we start at 6:30.
Okay.
And you know, Mom will tell me, he never had a problem getting up for football. I can't get him up for this. And to me, that's just a great statement of how it matters to our kids.
Sure.
And I know it's not like that everywhere. And I wish I could tell you, all right, this is exactly how we got to this point. Like I said, I think it's trying to develop that ownership.
Right.
But once you get them to that, it's a pretty neat thing to watch. And I don't think we'd have the success that we've had without, our players stepping up and being, just really good leaders. And like I said, it's not just on the field. It's got to be in the hallway. It's got to be in the weight room. It's got to be,
right.
In the off season on the practice field. When nobody else is there, that's when the leadership really has to step to the front.
Now, do you have any sort of, do you name any sort of leadership team or captains amongst that group, or is it really just kind of a senior-wide?
It's kind of a senior-wide thing. We don't honor captains until the end of the year.
Okay.
And we've been fortunate. We've played in the state championship game every year since 2004, I think. So we've been able to, that week, name team captains.
That week,
and they represent us that week. The rest of the time, we'll have game captains. We just kind of rotate around.
Yeah. Will you establish those earlier in the week or on Friday?
We do it on Friday.
Okay.
And then, so we actually do it on Thursday. Like when we have our walkthrough on Thursday before the game, we'll say captains tomorrow night will be whoever. And with that too, we'll do a scout team player of the week. And usually your scout team player of the week will be a sophomore, and it's somebody who's given, great effort, who, maybe we only had one running back this week for scout team. He got every rep, and we're playing one of those high teams, so he's, getting pounded. And, so we recognize those guys too, but, in the off season too, our weight coach, Brandon Waters, he has them in different teams.
Okay.
And the seniors, they get to draft, and it's a point total. At the end of the year, the winning team, we gave them like gift certificates to one of the restaurants here in town.
Sure.
And it gets pretty competitive. That's as close as we get to naming anything. But the kids really get into that. There may be some really talented player that doesn't get drafted early, because they see he's not as committed as the rest of them. And they get counted. Their attendance is counted, and that figures in somehow. And then each Wednesday during the summer, we'll have these team competitions. And he does it throughout the year too. Right now, he's working on doing it, but in the summer we'll have these team competitions. It's tug of war, it's obstacle course, it's those relays where you're using the sleds, all that kind of stuff. But and I just think your leaders kind of start to emerge. And one of another thing we don't do is at the end of the year we don't give a best lineman or a best running back, or the only team awards we give, or the only awards, are those captains, the individual awards. This year I think we had 3 captains that were elected by the team, and but hopefully your leaders kind of emerge, and the kids kind of know who they are. And it was pretty overwhelming this year when the vote, it was those 3 guys, and there were clearly others that got votes, but if we had 100, right at 100 kids on the varsity, these guys got 80% of the votes, those 3. So, and that's just, like I said, one of the things that I think help, build your program, make it important, because if it matters to them, I just think they're going to work a little bit harder at it. And it's going to be tougher for them to give up in the fourth quarter, and they're going to keep fighting.
Exactly.
Because it does matter to them.
Okay, so we've had two down, two main things, two great ideas to help your program start winning. I'm sure there's probably a list of about 50.
There's a few more.
But
sure.
we're gonna stick with 3 today for today's show. And number 3, Coach, what would you sum it up with?
I want to do make sure we're teaching great character, character development, and that helps us not only win on the field but off the field. And you know, when I first got into coaching, you know, I played in college at Furman University in South Carolina, and had great coaches. Bobby Johnson, who used to be at Vanderbilt a few years ago, he was the guy I GA'd under. Bruce Fowler, who's the head coach at Furman now, was my position coach. You know, and Tim Sarles, who was offense coordinator there for a long time, has been an old family friend. They modeled great character. They taught great character. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to get into coaching, is I wanted to have the same kind of impact on young people that those guys had on me.
Right.
And I grew up in a great family and great parents, but I still give a lot of credit to my coaches to, you know, I don't know, just develop that character,
Sure.
develop some of these life lessons that I think are so important. You know, football players, you know, practicing football is a whole lot harder than it is practicing baseball
Sure.
or basketball or, you know, whatever. And I tell a lot of coaches, you know, if you make a kid choose between practice basketball or practice football, they're going to go basketball about 99% of the
Right.
time. So I think, you know, it's just so important that we keep the game of football alive. And in a lot of places it's dying, and with concussion issues and, you know, all the other things that cost, you know, it's just really important that we do a good job as coaches to pull in as many players as we can.
Right.
And because there's so many great life lessons that get taught with football. Football's hard. You got to be tough. You know, you got to persevere. You know, it's not a whole lot of fun practicing football in August. You know, and especially in the South. You know, where it's you're wearing all that gear. You know, it's right at 100 degrees.
Right.
Your buddies are at the mall or at the pool or at the lake, hanging out. So, you know, I just think character development is so important, and every kid that gets to go through your program ought to be better, not just in football, but hopefully a better person after they come out of your program. You know, and a lot of this goes back to what we've talked about earlier, the character development of, you know, perseverance. And I'll tell a story in 2000, which was my second year as head coach. We started off the season 0-4. We lost our first 4. We had some off the field issues. We had a counterfeiting. We had some kids counterfeit some money.
No kidding.
It's kind of I don't think they were trying to bankrupt the
Sure.
whole system. They were just trying to see if they could get away with something.
Sure.
Well, next thing you know, the FBI's in here. You know, it was crazy.
Wow.
You know, but like I said, we started off 0-4. That group hung in there, and we won 11 in a row and won a state championship at the end of the year.
No kidding.
Yeah, so that was a great lesson of perseverance and hanging in there and listening to your coaches. You know, and I'm sure you don't have this, but around here the dads want to kind of coach their sons, and you know, and that was, we talked about that a lot as coaches. You know, you got to somehow listen to us over all the other people telling you that none of us know what we're doing.
Right.
You know, all that stuff. So, and I'll see some of those kids today in town, and they'll still talk about, you know, hanging in there. And one of our captains that year, you know, he was voted captain the week of the championship game. At the banquet a few weeks later, he says, you know, guys, you want to listen to your coaches. They know what they're talking about, no matter what your dad says. You know, and, so I'll never forget that. But you know, the character development, the life lessons that I think are just as important as the wins. You know, to me, we've been very successful at Maryville High School. You know, we've won a ton of games, but that's not the most important thing. If all we do is learn football at Maryville High School, then as coaches we've been failures. You know, hopefully, you know, they're better dads. Hopefully, they're better husbands.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, they're better people in the community after coming through our program than they were,
right,
or than they would have been if they hadn't come through our program. That's why it's so important as a head coach that you hire good guys to coach under you. And you know, we don't cuss them, we don't you know, abuse them or anything like that. Try not to belittle them. We want them, we coach them hard and push them and do all those things, but the character development it's vital,
right?
And that gets overlooked a lot of times. You know, in our world, you know, if you're not winning, then you're gone.
Right.
You know, it's not a real patient society.
Right.
You know, we want things now. We want it quickly, and somehow you have to figure out a way to get kids to develop some of that character and let them know that you care about them. And
right.
You know, there's a lot of kids that, you know, you're the dad for them. You're the only chance for them to see a positive role model from a male.
Sure.
And you know, that's why it's so important that we keep the game alive. And you know, I'm afraid for our game just because of all the issues right now. When the president comes out and says, you know, if I had a son, I don't think I'd let him play.
Right.
You know, come on. You know, I just think football it's what we're about as a country. You know, it's tough.
Right.
You know, it's that being physical.
Exactly.
You know, we're
right.
so afraid of I don't know, injuries and
Right.
all that stuff, and nobody wants to get hurt.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, I think we lose something in our country if we lose football. And,
Couldn't agree more, Coach.
Like I said, that character development is huge with me, and I think it's important to our other coaches too. And you know, hopefully our players are better today than they were when they were ninth graders walking into our program.
Well, I'm sure they are. Coach, thank you so much for joining me. We've had fun today on the Quickscreen show. And remember, put the pen and paper away and the X's and O's. If Coach Quarles is saying this is important, let's take some time to focus on this. Men, thanks for joining me. You've been on the Quickscreen show with Coach Quarles in Maryville, Tennessee. And we'll see you guys next Tuesday right here. Until then, coach 'em up.